Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our speaker series, the final winter speaker series program. We added this bonus session today. We have Andy Collins here from Centier Bank. He is going to be presenting on the history of the bank. They have a museum up there, so he'll be telling you all about that and how this little partnership came to be. So we are very happy to have you out here today. I am Julie Zazada. I'm the Executive Director here at the Cedar Lake Historical Association. And just a couple of quick reminders before we turn it over to Andy. I keep putting this one up all winter long. We are going to the Field Museum on Monday, September 25th. It's definitely a Monday at the end of September in the 20s. But we are going there, and so if you are interested in joining us on the bus trip, please make sure that you touch base with me after the program, and I will give you more information. I'm meeting with the Parks Department to finalize details this coming week. So I will finally have that available for you. May 7th, if you were not here for our annual birthday celebration for our building, she turned 102 years old 2 weeks ago, 2 Sundays ago. And so we had a wonderful program that is on our YouTube channel. We were covered in the newspaper as well as a result of the concept room that we debuted. So after the program today, we're more than happy to take you upstairs and show you that room if you were not here 2 weeks ago. So do not forget to ask about that. Couple more coming events that I want to draw your attention to this season. So June 7th is when we invite all of our colleagues and other volunteers in the local regional history network to come out and have a little presentation with us. We have lunch at the Lighthouse, and then we come back here and we have a couple of roundtables with professionals. This year we have a tourism roundtable, an exhibit design roundtable, and of course I'm blanking out that, Indiana Humanities is coming up and they'll be talking about grants. So if you are interested in something like that and you want to come and learn a little bit more with fellow colleagues who are doing local history here in the region, we'd love to have you join us. Member Cookout is coming up on June 25th. Most of you in the room, I think, are members, if not all of you. So if you want to come out for that, we'd love to have you. We provide the hot dogs and hamburgers and lemonade, and then you just bring a dessert or a side dish to share. Viridine's Whitlow Community Art Show. If any of you have artistic genius in you and you want to display, it could be anything. We have some quilts already registered. We have metal sculpture art, of course paintings, photography. All mediums are welcome, and we would like you to register your 3 pieces, up to 3 pieces, by July 1st if you want to participate in the art show. And then the Speakeasy, the most favorite event of the season for me. We're going to have a big party here and have a live band, mini dancing lessons, wonderful drinks and food. It's a really neat time, and as you can see, our guests actually dress up in 1920s clothes, and it is a lot of fun. So those are some events. It's all on the website, lassensresort.org, and then I have to end on the signature event. The steamboat's coming back, so we'll start steamboat rides on Wednesday, June 14th, and they will run all summer long through the end of September, every single Wednesday. Centier is actually our Commodore's sponsor this year. They are the premium sponsor for this program. And along with that, on Wednesday, July 26th, we are debuting a brand new Science of Steam exhibit. And so we will have a full day of programming that day. I think up to 3 extra steamboats will be coming and joining us here at the lake, so you're going to get to see some different types of steamboats. And we're also going to have a community boat parade. We're going to have a marionette puppet show. Just lots of activities going on throughout the course of the day, and of course showing you the new exhibit that we debut. So hopefully you will be joining us for all these wonderful events this summer. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy so that he can begin the history of Centier.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for all the nice things going on here in Cedar Lake. Absolutely fantastic what she has done and everything that's going on with this organization. Doing tasks like what Julie's doing are so, you really have to have such a servant heart to do that, because this is all community service and giving back in so many different ways. So, as Julie was telling you, my name is Andy Collins, and I am the corporate historian for Centier Bank. You might be asking yourself, why does a bank have a historian? Well, I always tell everybody that my job is to promote the bank and preserve the bank. So, in promoting the bank, what I do is I work with groups and give presentations and talking points about the history of Centier Bank. And that's one of the ways that I promote the history of the bank. When it comes to preserving the history of the bank, I'll tell you 75% of what I do for them is archiving old photos, news articles, bank documents, marketing items. Anything and everything that has been pertinent to Centier throughout the years is something that I work to preserve and archive. All of that is kept at our Whiting branch. We call that our legacy location. And I'll kind of explain a little bit more about some of those archival efforts in a minute here, but first I'm going to actually tell you the story of Centier and the Centier story. The story of Centier begins with a gentleman named Henry Schrag, and Henry was actually born in 1844 in Darmstadt, which I just love saying, and sometimes I like to practice and just say Darmstadt over and over again, or sometimes I stub my toe and say Darmstadt. But Henry Schrag was born in Darmstadt, Hesse, Germany, back in 1844, and like so many other immigrants, he traveled to America with his father, Christoph Schrag, and his mother, Frederica, and he had an older sister. They came here in 1854, and like so many other immigrants traveling from Europe, they were looking for more opportunities, a better life. And like so many other immigrants, they traveled to the U.S. and they came to Chicago. New York and Chicago were the two big landing spots for immigrants. Generally though, when people arrived in Chicago, they stayed in Chicago. Chicago, if you know anything about Chicago history and even into contemporary times, Chicago is such a melting pot of so many different ethnicities. So Henry and his family found a home in Chicago, and they actually traveled down from Chicago to what would become Whiting. Again, Lake County history. A lot of Lake County was a swamp, and Whiting was no different. Very primitive, but Henry and his father and his family, they traveled to Whiting and actually lived there for a short time. Christoph, his father, who was a merchant, actually purchased 50 acres of land in what was Whiting. Christoph purchased another tract of land a few years after that. I don't have a lot of records on it other than passed down oral histories, but we know that there were two purchases of land. The family lived in Whiting very briefly. They moved back to Chicago about a year later, but Henry's adventures were just getting started. Because in 1863, under an alias, Henry actually enlisted in the Union Army and fought against the Confederacy. He was there for about 2 years. We have a story, for those of you that are Civil War buffs, that Henry was on Sherman's March to the Sea. I would love for that to be legitimate, but I can't back that up too well. It's still fun to think about and fun to kind of daydream, but Henry was a part of Company K of the 30th Illinois Regiment. And so he fought in the Civil War. He was mustered out after 2 years of fighting in Louisville, and with nothing better to do, he actually returned to Whiting. In 1865, after returning from the Civil War, he settled on family property, and he worked on a nearby farm as well as a railroad. He earned a grand total of $1.10 a day. A little different than what we have today, but a living's a living, and that's kind of how I look at it. In 1868, he married Caroline Westerfeld. Caroline was also from Germany. In total, they had 6 kids, 4 sons and 2 daughters, and the youngest son is going to be an important character in the Centier story, but I'll get to him in just a minute here. But in 1868, while still working on the railroad and having just been married, Henry opened a general store, and Carolyn actually ran the general store. A couple years later, in 1871, they added to the general store a post office. Now, this is an important milestone, for lack of better words, because this is one of the first examples that we have of the Schrag family giving back to the communities that they live in and the communities that they served. At that time, being postmaster was not, there weren't post offices everywhere. You didn't have mail carriers everywhere. Post offices were few and far between, so doing that was sort of a service that you would do for your community, and it made sense to be in a general store. So that's something that Henry and Caroline provided for the community of Whiting. And for those of you who don't know or aren't super familiar with Whiting, Whiting was really built off of the back of Standard Oil. You could call it a refinery town. And in 1889, Standard Oil opened up in Whiting. And also that same year, Whiting became a town. And in the process of opening up the refinery at Standard Oil, Christoph actually sold all the land that he had bought to Standard Oil. Now, that's important because from the proceeds of that sale, Henry had enough capital. He had $35,000 from the sale of that land to open what was the Bank of Whiting on April 21st, 1895. The first day of deposits was $5,698, and this was opened to serve the community because, as we all know, just like I said, post office is not in abundance. Well, what else wasn't in abundance? The police, and so a bank in a community that was starting to grow and just get that hustle and bustle needed some sort of location where money could be kept safe and their money could also grow. So Henry opened the Bank of Whiting in 1895. This is actually the very first location that we ever had. That is on 119th Street. If anybody's familiar with it, it's down by, conveniently, Schrag Avenue. But this building is actually completely gone. What happened was this served as the Bank of Whiting from 1895 to 1910, but this building here was actually purchased throughout the years, went through different ownership, but in the early 1980s, two brothers from Whiting bought it, and they were hoping to renovate it a bit and turn it into, I think it was an apartment building was the goal. Things didn't work out, so they actually tore the building down. But this archway right here by the front door, that archway, for whatever reason, I don't know how this worked, was still standing in the field where that building was located at. So for the better part of 40 years, there was an archway and an empty field in Whiting. We actually went there in October of 2020 and hired some masons to cut it down brick by brick, and they actually brought it to our museum. But still a fun factoid that was our original location. We unfortunately only have one photo that I can find of the inside of it. We have no photos of the outside of it after it had been in business for the 15 years, but we at least have some photos of the outside, so that way we could at least have some record of it. In 1910, we actually moved to our present location in Whiting, 1500 119th Street. This is actually the building that I work out of every day. The photo that you're seeing is actually from a postcard that was made in 1917. But you can see this is the building. If you know anything about Whiting, this is us at the corner of New York and 119th. I work on the second floor there. That's been the catch-all for historical items, and we actually call that our legacy location. So I was telling you about how Henry and Carolyn had 6 kids. Their youngest was a gentleman named Walter. And Walter got very involved with the community of Whiting. He served on the school board, he was elected to the school board, and that was actually his first foray into any sort of elected office. But in 1913, Walter actually became the mayor of Whiting and was mayor for 4 terms. While he was mayor, the son of Henry Schrag, Walter Schrag, served for 4 terms. He oversaw the improvement of infrastructure in Whiting, which included paved streets, wooden sidewalks. He installed numerous parks and playgrounds. He put in an incinerating plant, which was for waste disposal and the like. Obviously, we don't want to do too much of that nowadays, but back in the day, that was a solution. So he put that in to help with garbage cleanup. But the big thing that he really put in was a water filtration plant. As I was telling you, Northwest Indiana, especially the northern part of Lake County, big swamp ground. So clean drinking water was not something that was in abundance, so problems like dysentery were pretty commonplace. But Walter was the one who put in a filtration plant for the city. Now, In 1917, Walter actually became the president of Bank of Whiting. We were also incorporated that year as a state chartered bank. And then a few years later, we went through the Great Depression, and Henry created a 15-year trust which backed all of the bank's deposits. Long story short, what he did by creating that trust was ensuring that anybody that deposited their money into the Bank of Whiting kept their money at a time when everybody was losing their money. So Henry did that against his own fortunes. He put up his own money to protect the assets of everybody that was banking there. So Walter served his community, was mayor, was the president of the Bank of Whiting, and he also had a son. His son was Walter Schrog Jr., affectionately known as Wally. And Wally joined the bank in 1933 as a clerk. I have some records, though, that point to him as being an errand boy, going as far back as 1926. It sounds more like it was a summer job. He was just kind of bouncing around and helping his dad. But in 1937, Wally actually left to go and manage Straub pianos. Straub pianos were manufactured in Hammond, just a few miles south of where we're at. This rendering here is of the old Straub Piano Company in Hammond. A good portion, this section here, is actually still standing in Hammond. The business is not there anymore, and that portion of the structure is actually a storage facility, but Wally went and ran Straub pianos. One of the reasons why he did that was because Straub pianos had taken out a loan with the bank and they defaulted on it. So the Bank of Whiting, for a short time, not only handled banking services, they also owned a piano company. So Wally went to go and run that. The big idea behind that was that his father, Walter Sr., wanted Wally to get more business experience. So Wally ran Straub pianos for a few years, but then in 1941 he returned and became the president of the Bank of Whiting, and that was because his father went ill that same year and passed away, so Wally rejoined the bank. Now, a couple years later, he married this gal here, Doris Smith. And I really want to bring a lot of attention to Doris because Doris was actually the executive assistant of Walter Sr. And Doris actually went to bat for Wally. When the bank was determining what to do with Walter Sr. becoming ill and passing away, and they're looking for a new bank president, a number of the folks on the board of directors did not want Wally to take over. There were a few other people that were involved with the bank that they felt was qualified, but Doris had a lot of energy. I never actually knew Doris, but a number of our associates who have been tenured with us knew her, and they all say that she was just an absolute spitfire. Well, Doris, back when they were transitioning to the new bank president, went to bat for Wally and just fought for him tooth and nail. Fought hard enough that that the board went ahead and gave him the chance to be the bank president. And little family secret, Doris actually ran the bank while Wally was still learning. So for the better part of 5 years, the Bank of Whiting was actually run by Doris Smith. Now Wally is a very fascinating guy. All accounts that we have of him and his son Mike, who is our current CEO, and I'll get to Mike in a minute here, we have great stories from Mike and again, just written accounts of Wally, but Wally is always compared to Jimmy Stewart from It's a Wonderful Life. Real happy-go-lucky guy, you know, he's a man of the people, about town, lots of handshake deals, and we do a lot of oral histories. I volunteer with the Whiting Historical Society, and we do oral histories with some of the residents in town, and this one gal told me just the most amazing story, and it was such a tearjerker. But when she was a little girl, her father, who was an immigrant, had absolutely no money, didn't have a penny to his name, no credit or anything like that, and desperately needed some money to pay for their mortgage. He went to the Bank of Whiting, went and met with Wally, and a few words were exchanged, a handshake was given, and the man left with a handful of cash and was just told, pay me back whenever. Now this gal was telling me this story, and And the real tearjerker part was that she says, the only time I ever saw my dad cry was on that day. And apparently this hardened fellow from Europe broke down like a little child and just started crying because of the generosity that was given to him by Wally Schrag. So Wally oversaw the bank's growth for a few years in the bank's development, and in 1960 we went from being the Bank of Whiting to being the first Bank of Whiting. This was to differentiate ourselves from the State Bank of Whiting, which was kitty corner to our location at 119th in New York. If you're ever in Whiting, stop in and see our bank, stop in and see our museum, but keep your eyes open for a building that's right there at the corner on the north side. Beautiful, beautiful building. That was the State Bank of Whiting. We felt the need to differentiate ourselves from them, and so we became the first Bank of Whiting. In 1963, though, we opened our second branch, which was in Highland, and that's at the corner of Indianapolis and 45th. The photo right there is actually of the groundbreaking. It's kind of small, I know, but you can see Wally in the middle there, and right next to him is his son, Mike. So, Wally had been the president of the bank, and his son, Mike, joined the bank. Now, Mike went to Culver. He was a Culver graduate. Then he went to Denison College in Ohio, and then he went to the University of Colorado for his Master's of Business. Originally, Mike did not want to get into banking at all. He was an athlete. He was a very accomplished amateur wrestler, and he actually wanted to get into coaching and athletics. But at the University of Colorado, he found that he really enjoyed marketing. So he agreed to come to work for the bank under one stipulation. He wanted to grow the bank. He started as a teller, and he worked in the marketing department, and he did a variety of jobs all throughout the bank. But he joined us on September 11 of 1972. So last year, we actually celebrated Mike's 50th anniversary as an employee of Centier Bank. So Mike's big stipulation for joining the bank was that he wanted to grow it. And so after Mike joined, it was only a year later that we opened our Dyer branch, and then in 1975 we opened our Pine Island branch. So Pine Island, of course, is in Cherville. It's one of those amazing things in Northwest Indiana. I always get this wrong. I think it's a Crown Point address located in Cherville, but a Maryville phone number. I always get them mixed up. I just know it's a hodgepodge because it's on, that's just how it goes. I grew up in Crown Point, but I had lots of friends from Cedar Lake, yet they all had Crown Point addresses and St. John phone numbers. I don't know how that all works, but so we opened Pine Island in 1975, and then we opened Griffith in 1976. A few years later, in 1977, Mike Schrag became the president of First Bank while he was getting up there in years, so he decided to take a semi-retirement. He stayed on as CEO and board chairman, but Mike took over as president of the bank. In 1980, Mike Schrag created First Bank Shares. Now this is important because for whatever reason, the United States government had some unique laws in place. And one of the laws that they had said that a bank could not open a new location in a town where another bank had its headquarters. I don't know why that was a law. I don't know why a lot of things are laws, but they are. And so the U.S. government had that policy in place. So the workaround to that was to create First Bank Shares, and so that enabled, at the time, Bank of Whiting to actually purchase other banks. So that way, we went into Crown Point and we purchased the First National Bank of Crown Point, and then we purchased the South Lake National Bank of Lowell. We saw a lot of growth in the 1970s, and we really peaked in the 90s and early thousands, but it's the 80s that is really just that super critical time. A huge thing that came out of this acquisition was that we actually went into a debt from doing that. Buying a bank is not a cheap thing to do. It's a bit on the costly side. But that was a debt that we actually paid off over the course of almost 15 years. Now, a big question that I always get, when did we become Centier and where does the name Centier come from? Well, 1991 is when we decided we are branching out all over Lake County and we're moving into Porter County. So let's go ahead and drop the part officially that says that we are connected to Whiting. It's not that we're trying to ignore Whiting, it's that we were trying to create a name that was a little more universal and kind of represented the fact that we could have been anywhere. So the name Centier was chosen and we changed our name officially from the First Bank of Whiting to Centier. For a little while we were unofficially First Bank, but we became Centier Bank. Now Centier Bank is actually a created word. It's a combination of two different words. It's the combination of the word century, because we were going to be celebrating our 100th anniversary as a bank a few years later, in 1995, but at the time, very big milestone, still is a big milestone, so we took the word century, and then we mixed that with the word premier, because we offer premier banking services. So century plus premier gets you Centier. Another small tidbit to that was that our original location was near Center Street, so they incorporated that as part of it too. So Center, Century, and Premier gets you Centier. So as I was telling you, we had a lot of growth and we've been moving past Lake County. And as you can see, 1988 we branched out and opened our first location in Porter. It would be 16 years later that we started branching out into the other counties all throughout Northwest Indiana. And as you can see, we go as far south as Indianapolis and as far east as Fort Wayne. We have more than 60 locations, and when you break it down, we opened 6 locations in the 70s, 6 locations in the 80s, another 14 in the 90s, another 14 in the early 2000s, and then in the 2010s, we moved to we opened 25 locations. So we actually have more than 60 locations. We have almost 1,000 employees, and I always just have to stop and take a moment to think about that. Here it is that we were a bank set up to serve one community, handful of employees. The best guesstimate I can give you on that was it was probably about 5 or 6 people at one location. Fast forward to 128 years later, 60 locations across 1,000 employees. Original assets were a little bit more than $5,000. Today we're at more than $6 billion. So we've seen obviously a lot of terrific growth, a lot of accomplishment throughout the area, a lot of communities that we get to serve. Another major milestone, of course, for those of you that have ever driven through Maryville, you've probably seen this. This is our corporate center. This opened in 2008 and took 18 months to build. With all of the expansion and the way that we're moving, they needed a central location, a headquarters, if you will, to basically be a spot that could act as a hive mind for all of the branches. Basically, before this, everybody was scattered about. You had marketing and HR were located at our Crown Point branches. Then you had loan processing and mortgages were up in Whiting. There was a mortgage office in Highland. Everybody was all over the place, but in 2008 they opened our corporate campus. So with all of this growth, obviously it's not something that's done overnight, and it's also not easy. It's probably one of the more obvious statements of the year. But Mike Schrag, who was the bank's president at the time and CEO, ended up testing positive for what's called Epstein-Barr virus. From Epstein-Barr virus, a number of health ailments can come from this, but the main one that Mike really started to suffer from was something called chronic fatigue syndrome. With that, he entered a state of massive depression, had numerous other health ailments that came with it, and essentially what was happening was that he was working himself into the ground. And he ended up having to take 6 months away from the bank, and it was during that time that he rested and decided that he was going to change his life. This led him to adopting a number of personal values, and this helped him change his life for the better. The big thing that Mike adopted at this time was giving back, was giving service back to the communities that he served. He had great leadership examples from his great-grandfather Henry, from his grandfather Walter Sr., and then from his father Wally, because they were all involved in the community. But Mike really wanted to do the same thing. So he started giving back to all the communities that Centier was located in. I've got a couple of images here, and these are all from throughout the years. Mike started up the Schrag Family Foundation, which is gives out scholarships to students going to college. We've gotten involved with Habitat for Humanity. We do financial education programs for kids. Throughout the years, you can see we've worked with trade ones, we've done toy drives. That one specifically is from Hoosier Boys Town. Our associates even give back their time and help volunteer with a lot of these great organizations. I myself, I don't really care, I'm not above doing this. I've gotten my hands just absolutely filthy, covered in paint, dust, debris from getting to volunteer. And it's absolutely awesome when you work for an organization that just really encourages you to get involved with the community. In addition to that, we are one of the founding partners of the Mascot Hall of Fame, which is also located in Whiting. So if you get the chance, Whiting is a tremendous walking community. So much to do on 119th, of course, start with the Centier Bank Museum. But if you get the chance, you can also visit the Mascot Hall of Fame, and then there's tons of eateries and just fun little boutiques all throughout Whiting. But giving back has always been a really big part of Centier, and a very big part of that has, that has played a big part, in the development of our internal culture. Our internal culture is extremely important to us because when you have a place that is happy and fun, that makes for associates who are happy and like to have fun as well. So I am extremely fortunate to count myself in as a member of the Centier family. In 1985, we actually started one of the first of many internal events. We started our Celebration of Excellence. That's an annual meeting that we hold every year, and it's always just got an absolute fun theme, and I'm telling you, we get as many of our associates together. The last one we had was actually last September, and we had to rent out one of the event rooms at the casino in Michigan City. And but that event still goes on today. In 1987, Mike introduced our employee stock ownership program, which is still active today. We started our Quarter Century Club in 1989, which is for associates who are tenured enough and have been with us for more than 25 years. Now, one of the things that I got to tell you about is that this is actually our charter group of associates in the Quarter Century Club. We started off with 5 people. Now the club has more than 80 members to it. And that to me is just kind of a testament that shows that if people are there for 25 years, obviously we're doing something right to keep people there that long. We even have associates that are holding off retirement just so they can get that extra year or two, so that way they can join the Quarter Century Club. In addition to it, we've won many awards across the state. The big one that we're always the most proud of is Best Places to Work. That's put on by the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. And then in 2009, we established our CARE program. And the CARE program stands for Centier Associates Reaching Everyone. And this program is a program that's put in place for Centier associates who have hit hard financial times. They can either apply to CARE or someone can actually do it on their behalf. And what the CARE Fund does is that provides that associate with a financial gift to help them out with a hardship that maybe they're facing in their life. It could be a medical bill. It could be a car payment. It could be an insurance payment. But the CARE program that we have at Centier steps in and pays the bill directly for that associate. And there's no reimbursement is required. There's no obligation. So it's just one of those amazing things that we get to enjoy being Centier associates, is when they do amazing things like that for us. Now, historical initiatives and what I do being the bank's historian. I always hear people saying, whenever I tell them I'm the historian for Centier Bank, I always get that one line. I always hear it. Why does a bank have a historian? And it's like, I gotta give the elevator speech. So my job is to preserve the bank's history and promote the bank's history. One of the things that happened was that back a few years ago, Anthony Contrucci, who is Mike Schrog's son-in-law, went to a conference with Mike's daughter, Stephanie Schrog, and the conference was all about family-owned businesses. And one of the breakout rooms that they were in started talking about the importance of historical preservation for family-owned businesses like this. So Anthony, who is actually my boss, came up with the idea of a book that would be about the history of Centier Bank. And that's actually what started everything. Because as they were finding research for the book, that's when they just started finding all the amazing stories and all the richness that was found in our heritage. So the book was actually the first thing we did, but before we could get to the book, we had to start archiving the bank's history. So Anthony went about getting the book in motion, and then he created the position of corporate historian for the bank, and that was back in 2018. My predecessor actually joined then, and she did a tremendous job and was there for about 2 years. I joined in 2020, and when I joined, I took over the same thing. I took over, the museum was not finished yet, it was in production though, so I got to act as the foreman for everything on scene, and then I took over with our archives. The book, unfortunately, fortunately for the bank, was finished. Unfortunately for me, I'm a researcher at heart, so I love research. But the bank was done, or the book was done, and our museum was in progress, and I took over archiving all of the bank's history. So everything with the bank's history is stored on the second floor of our Whiting location. I actually conveniently use an old bank vault to store everything. All of our temperature and humidity is monitored every day. The facility itself is not my ideal location to store some of the items. 90% of them are safe, but those that are a little bit on the touchier side, we keep a close eye on there, and we have some plans for additional storage measures in the future. Everything is in acid-free housing, and I use the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative to do all of my archiving. And we use Microsoft Access to store all of the data. And then 90% of what gets archived is actually shared online with an online cloud host called Omeka. So far, we have 6,700 items archived. I would like to say that there is light at the end of the tunnel, but there isn't. I open up a box and I will find stacks and stacks and stacks of photos. But I'm also one of those people that I love the routine of archival work like that. I like to get my hands on it, like to make sure that it's preserved the best that I can do, high-res scans, and then entering data, and that's just me. I zero in. I like to just put the headphones on and forget everything else and just do my typing, but I absolutely love it. So I look forward to, like I said, we have 6,700 items. Probably looking at anywhere from another 10,000 items more to go, and I'm actually A-okay with that. I wish it was 20,000. So, as I was telling you, we store everything in Access, so I know it's a little bit smaller here, but you can see all of the data that gets entered here, identifiers, names, descriptions, subjects, and what collection it falls into. We've got our Omeka website there, and then everything gets loaded into the back end. So, like I said, it's a lot of just zeroing in, a lot of typing, a lot of copy and paste, to be honest with you. But that's archival work. As I was telling you, we have our book, Centier Bank and Family Legacy. Sarah Morgans wrote it, put it together with Fenwick Publishing. This book is available actually in the lobby of our branches. It's also available, and it should be available in all of the libraries here in Lake County. So if you ever want to read a copy, stop into a branch, take a look at the copy there, or stop at your local library. It's also available to read for free on Centier's website. I have business cards that I can hand out if you're interested in reading it, and we can correspond, and I can get you in touch with where you can read it. But the book is absolutely fantastic. It's got interviews with Schrag family members, current and former associates, local historians, residents. It's just a tremendous, tremendous read. And then another big part of what we do, or what I do specifically, is the Centier Bank Museum. Now, this is located at our Whiting branch, and that made the most sense for us for two reasons. Number one, it is the oldest branch we have, but then number two, it's actually one of the larger branches that we have. So we had a lot of room to play around with. This was actually put together by Peter Hyde Design. He did all of the design and the layout. A gal named Bethany Fleming wrote all of the copy for it, and then Chicago Scenic did the install. Here you can learn the Centier story. You can see just amazing artifacts that we have on display there. We opened our doors there June 29 of 2021. We had to unfortunately delay everything because of COVID, but we opened our doors in June of 2021. I regularly do presentations and tours there. I was telling Julie earlier, I just had my first group of fifth graders last Monday. I'm still recovering. So, no, I'll tell you this though, they were absolutely fantastic. We had 12 kids, and you want to think that 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds would take that much interest in banking. But I tell you, when they left there, they all wanted to be bankers. So, and then actually, one other thing that we do there, which is selfishly my most favorite thing and my most favorite part of the job, our orientation on onboarding is 3 days of orientation. On the third day, all of the new hires come up to the museum. They take our trolley. They come up there, and I get them for the morning. I do a presentation just like I'm doing now, talking about the history, and then I show them around the museum. I let them break up, and then I meet with them one-on-one, try to. Sometimes some get away, but I talk to them one-on-one, and I get to know them and learn who they are. And it's just absolutely love it because it's a mixture of history with connecting with people one-on-one. I absolutely love that part of it. The last part of our historical initiatives that we're doing is that we are trying to restore the Schrag family mansion. This is up in Whiting on Schrag Avenue. This mansion was actually built by the bank's founder, Henry Schrag. It was built back sometime in the 1920s. I don't have a lot of research on it. I don't have a lot of records about it. This has been a tough one to research because we just don't have a whole lot. What we do know though is that where this parking lot was over here, there was a church there, and that was Immaculate Conception Church. In the 1920s, Henry, on his passing, willed the mansion to Immaculate Conception Church, and they actually used it as a rectory up until the early 2000s when the church was torn down. The church then donated, or gave the house actually gave the house to the city, so technically the city of Whiting owns it, but we are doing a partnership with the city to get it restored. The exterior of it has been finished. That finished up in 2020. And the city of Whiting did an absolutely beautiful job with the grounds. And actually Immaculate Conception's grotto is still there. The grotto is just absolutely just beautiful. I should have put a photo in there, shame on me for that. But when it comes to the inside, that is the million-dollar question, and I always have to give the same answer as diplomatically as I can. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the inside. We've talked about a few different things. Restoration of it is a work in progress. It's going to be a long process. But we've talked about all different ideas for it. It's unfortunately just a little too small to be an event center, and So that means things like weddings and what have you. We could host them on the lawn, but if you had to go inside, it'd be a bit on the cramped side. But we're still working things out and trying to figure out what to do with that. So that is a lot of the Centier story. As always, exit through the gift shop. So if you have any questions, you can check us out, Centier.com, or like I said, I've got some business cards I'll hand out. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to contact me. If you want to talk the history of Centier, I'm always open, or if you just want to talk about history, I am a history nerd. So,